Hello, friends. Welcome back to Earth Now with myself, your host, Zara Anna. Always glad to be with you. Always glad to be sharing stories of people taking action to create a better world. Okay, so this time around, I heard from a listener who was asked by her child, what could she do? She was just a child. She's hearing all this talk about how climate change is causing so much havoc everywhere, and the trees are dying, et cetera, et cetera. The oceans are polluted. Well, what can children do around the world? And so here it is. I thought, okay, it's a good topic for a show. I'm going to start with how children in various parts of the world are taking action to create a better world. And here's the first story of two children. One was 10, the other was 12. When they first met in Canada, they were both at a sustainability conference because each one in their home state had kind of taken action to create a campaign to clean up around their waterways. A little boy named Cash in Tennessee had started with the local river around where he lived, which is the biggest river running through Tennessee and actually running through the whole of America. And so he decided one day that, oh my God, look at all the pollution, look at all the trash around the beach. What can I do? And he started really by himself. Okay, just in his little mind, okay, I have to do something. Started by himself, cleaning up whatever trash he could. And pretty soon, he got his family involved, and then the neighbors, and then the whole town. And it really grew into a movement. And he became kind of known all over the country and was invited to the sustainability conference in Canada, where he met a little girl named Ella, who in her own way in the area of Ontario had started to be concerned about the oceans around her, particularly the sea life that did not seem to be doing too well from everything she was hearing and reading, and again began a campaign to sort of try to save the ocean, as it were. So these two kids suddenly took a liking to each other, and they thought, okay, well, one is here in the U.S., the other is in Canada. What if they joined their commitment and their activities and expanded outward to the rest of the world by forming an organization that they decided to call the Cleanup Kids? That Cleanup Kids. All right, just like the name sounds, they wanted to involve not just hundreds, but thousands and hundreds of thousands of kids across the globe to join their campaign so that wherever a child was on the planet, they could look around their own community and their own waterways. They were both concerned with cleaning up water, and they could see, okay, if you're living in India, if you're living in Africa, Latin America, wherever, the U.S., you could look around your community, and wherever the river, the waterways, and the oceans were, you could see what was happening there, and then just start with yourself if you needed to, just to clean up whatever you could. In other words, take one step at a time. You don't have to create an entire movement like they were doing, but they were advising the kids internationally to say, okay, look, we can all do something. It may not be like a huge step at the beginning, but one step at a time, one little area to be cleaned up at a time, multiplied, hundreds of thousands of times, maybe a million times or more across the planet, can make a very, very big difference. And sure enough, within short amount of time, these two kids, Cash and Ella, having formed the Cleanup Kids, started an entire international movement of encouraging other kids to take action to create a better world, clean up the waterways, clean up their community, clean up whatever they felt motivated to clean up, and to start wherever they were. Just a great story that illustrates that anybody can be an Earth Now hero. Anybody, no matter what age, no matter how young and between middle age or old, doesn't matter who or what you are, where you are, just start. If you have an idea, if you have a concern about the Earth, if you have an idea or concern about how to better the Earth, how to create a better world, just start with a small step wherever you are. Again, Cleanup Kids, the Cleanup Kids, the Cleanup Kids. Can't say it often enough. What a great organization. If you feel motivated, just look them up and just join their effort. Okay, so here's a story that is coming from India. This is a story of a 13-year-old girl living in a small rural village in India who was lucky enough to be wearing shoes. Now, people might say, well, what's the big deal about wearing shoes? Well, in the West, we're not used to not thinking about shoes. We take shoes for granted. Look around, most of the people, unless they want to go barefoot on the beach or somewhere else, but that's their own decision. But imagine if you didn't have shoes. You have no money to buy shoes. You're a parent, poor parent in India, cannot afford to buy shoes for your children. And your children are walking around all the time, not just for a day or two, not just for amusement, but this is their lifestyle. They're now walking around without shoes all over the place, very hot, dry, dusty roads, picking up all kinds of stuff that's on the road, all kinds of bacteria that could lead to all kinds of diseases because they're going right into the skin of your foot as you're walking around because you have no protection whatsoever. And there you are, a child, you may not know any better. You may not know that anything else exists. You may not even know that, there are shoes to be wearing. This is just how you've been brought up in a very poor way. So here's this 13-year-old girl thinking, well, I have shoes, but I'm looking around. The other children don't have shoes. And of course, she noticed that the other little children's feet are cracked and dirty, sometimes bleeding. And pretty soon she began to feel, oh my God, what can I do? She started to feel a little guilty and at times couldn't sleep at night worrying about the kids that were walking around without shoes and picking up all kinds of diseases and stuff. And she said, well, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And she thought, oh, maybe I'll just go to the local shoemaker and see if I can do something. And she thought, okay, maybe I'll ask him if he has any leftover leather from making the shoes of the paying customers. Maybe I can just get all of those little pieces of leather. Imagine this is how our mind is working. Maybe I can just, gather up those leftover little pieces of leather, and maybe I can learn how to fashion shoes and at least help maybe one or two kids if I can. So when she went to the shoemaker kind of looked at this little girl, and kind of bewilderment. Well, why do you want this leftover leather? And she said, well, look, all these children don't have any shoes. They're walking around. Their feet are just chapped and dry and bleeding. That's not a good thing. They're going to get sick. Well, the shoemaker had not even thought about this himself, let alone having been asked to just turn over leftover pieces of leather. But the shoemaker started to think, well, wait a second. This little girl has a point. This little girl is right. These little kids in my village don't have shoes. Maybe I can help. So here's the shoemaker and this little girl now having the same thought that they should help these little kids. Where before, the shoemaker had never even thought about it, except for the girl mentioning it to him. And so he went to the back room. He saw all these, leftover pieces of leather. And he said to the girl, I'm going to help you. I'm going to start making, some shoes for these kids that don't have any shoes. And so the girl thought, oh, great. I've got one shoemaker. What if I go around the other little villages and I start talking to the other shoemakers and can do the same thing there? Because it wasn't just in her village that the little children didn't have any shoes. It was the surrounding area of poor people, and only a few lucky ones like her parents were able to afford shoes. So sure enough, she started going around one village after another, pleading her cause, encouraging the shoemakers to turn over the leftover leather, and maybe they themselves can make, shoes for the children without shoes. And sure enough, within a year's worth of time, she had enrolled a lot of shoemakers in this effort. Again, one little girl starting an entire organization, right, of shoemakers in a rural part of India, making shoes for kids that don't have any shoes. And I think now, a couple of years later, she's up to having provided over 200,000 pairs of shoes to children who otherwise would not have any shoes and be walking around just in the dirt picking up whatever they pick up with their little feet and causing a lot of diseases. I mean, you could step on animals, you could just step on a lot of stuff. Not a good idea, okay? And doctors will warn you, not a good idea to walk around barefoot all the time. Once in a while, maybe, if you want to. But if that's your lifestyle, if you have any choice, that is a haven underneath your feet to be picking up diseases and get really seriously sick. So my kudos go to this little girl in India. What a great story of just one child. Again, this is a child that thought up this great idea of how to help, looked around her community and saw, oh my God, I have to help these children. And that's exactly what she did. Great story. Another Earth Now story of children taking action to create a better world. All right, on to my next story of a 9-year-old child named Eve. Eve had grown up in a very crowded London, England setting all her life. And at about the age of 7, her parents, who had always wanted to create a sustainably off-grid living lifestyle. But, the thought of doing that was very difficult, because imagine if you're always used to living in a city life, you don't all of a sudden say, I think I'll just go off to the forest and start from nothing. In these days, it's not that easy to do that. And most people, having grown up with the comforts of a city life, are not about to go do that. But Eve's parents were determined that one way or another, they just didn't want the crowded city life with all that means. Yes, there's comforts and there's culture in a big city, but there's also the downsides, the expensive rents and mortgages, everything expensive and going up and up and up, as we all know right now on the planet. Nor did they want to deal with the levels of crime and pollution and just a lifestyle that they did not agree with that was being pushed on their kids in the school system. So they thought, okay, it's now or never. So they completely uprooted themselves. Just think of the enormity of that. Think of yourself. You're living in a nice either city or small town here in the West, here in America. All of a sudden, you're going to say, you know what? This is not for me. I'm just going to uproot myself, take whatever belongs I can, and I'm going to go join an off-grid small forest community away from everything. Okay, so you're not used to anything in the woods, anything in a forest. So you have to start from scratch. So this brave family with little Eve went off to the forest, and of course Eve super upset because she had to leave all her little friends at school and everything that she knew. But obviously at 7 years old, you're going to go where your parents are taking you. So the parents went off to this forest community, off-grid living, and again, one step at a time, had to learn to construct the house. You had to live off the land. Of course, they had the help of the other community members. This is a small community. It was not a huge community. But luckily, they had the benefit of other people having gone to that community before and built a very nice, sustainable life for themselves. So it wasn't as hard as it could have been, but it was still very, very difficult to make that transition from city living to now in the middle of nowhere in a very pretty forest. But okay, now you're going to have to build your house, grow your food, sort of live off the grid, generate electricity off the grid as best you can. So little by little, they learned how to do that, set themselves up in a house and started growing the food. And Eve started to see Oh, look at all these nice animals in the tree. In other words, she started to acclimate herself to her surroundings to the point of this is like merging with nature, appreciating the beauty of nature, because nature, without nature, none of us would be alive. And so she learned the whole circle of life of how to grow food, how to be with nature, how to be with the creatures, the life forms in the forest, and she started to really love the birds and all the bees and the animals and everything else, the butterflies. And of course her parents, would always say to her, we're on this planet, the bees are in danger and the butterflies are in danger, which is true. I've done shows on, how the butterflies are declining. Without butterflies, none of us will be alive because they're great pollinators of food, and without food, none of us can sustain. So Eve, started to just immerse herself in the beauty of nature, and now she loved being in this environment. And pretty soon she went off to the local, wherever the local nearest school was. And she was very different from the other children at that school, because the other children at least lived in nearby towns and had sort of creature comforts compared to her. But Eve started to get so motivated in her sustainable lifestyle and her love for the forest now and her love for the animals and her concern that, around her, it wasn't like her beautiful setting. It was like, the pollution of the London that she left behind. And she started to kind of talk to the other children about being more responsible, about nature being more sustainable, being more off grid, and taking action to do whatever you can in whatever setting that you find yourself in. And she became so good. Her teachers were so impressed with her that pretty soon, little Eve, now age 9, was beginning to speak at nearby towns, advising those people how to preserve whatever clean water, whatever good growing crops and trees they had. And she became kind of a little celebrity and is now literally advising town councils on how to best prepare and best preserve whatever natural settings they have around them, whether it's in parks, whether it's developing community gardens, whether it's trying to take action to clean up whatever waterways and oceans they have around them, because everybody, wherever you are, I mean, the waterways or your gateway to life and living. Without the water, nothing grows anywhere, and we would all be in trouble. So Eve, again, started from a kid in the hood of London, so to speak, in the streets of London. Okay, now she's with the trees in the forest and speaking about that to other people. Another great story of what a child is doing around the planet to take action to create a better world, and inspiring the entire world with her activism, with her speaking, just with her incredible energy that she has now about this entire topic of how to preserve the land around of us, how to live in harmony with the land, how to grow natural food and sustain yourself with that as best you can, wherever you are. Even if you're living in London, you can start growing a garden, even in a little patch around your house, or even in the roof, or you can build yourself a small greenhouse. There's so many ways for all of us to be self-sufficient and more sustainable, no matter the environment that we find ourselves in. And that's what these 3 stories of these 3 kids, the cleanup kids that have started an entire amazing global movement, the little girl in India that's providing shoes for 200,000 children and counting right now, or Eve that's now inspiring other kids and motivating them to clean up their environment. It doesn't matter. Again, children are our future. And I'm so glad that there is a movement of children taking action to create a better world and really becoming Earth Now heroes and inspiring others to become Earth Now heroes. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. And remember, go out and be an Earth Now hero. Take action to create a better world.